Welcome to the EVerest Technical Steering Committee meeting for February of 2024. Let's have a quick look at some highlights of like the last month. There's been like a big webinar from the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation together with the Linux Foundation Energy at the end of January, where a lot was talked about EVerest there. It's definitely worth a look if you're interested. Should be easy to find online. There'll be a OCA, OCPP Plugfest and a conference about open source in e-mobility at the Pionic site in Bad Schönborn in Germany next week. And yeah, another highlight is that the Rust support seems to be quite complete now. Let's have a quick look at this antitrust policy. Everybody knows the drill by now, so please only share things that you are allowed to share, and your participation in this meeting basically means that you accept this antitrust policy. So let's have a look at what's new, and we start with a little event recap. Just the last couple of days, eWorld is happening in Essen, and we had a little booth there, and apparently had a lot of interesting discussions with people. Not sure if Moritz also wants to say something from CharIN here, because you mentioned on the slide.
Actually, no, because I wasn't there, so I don't know what happened.
Marco is there or was there, and that's why he can't do the TSC, because I think he's on the way back from it at the moment. But I think you can maybe say something to the CharIN Testival.
Yeah, sure. We were the only EVerest representatives at the CharIN Testival, end of January, beginning of February. We went there with 2 charging stations, an AC charger, focus on high-level charging, and this little DC charger you see on the top photo, sort of micro megawatt charger, similar to what Pionics has. We were there to focus on both plug and charge and on -20 testing. Unfortunately, -20, well, I have to explain, there's an experimental branch with work in progress for that in the various ISO 15118 and EVerest core repositories. That was what we were using. There were very few testing partners. We didn't actually see any real vehicle or get the chance to test with any real vehicle, so just against conformance testers, and had a few observations there. Obviously, because only really good cases are coded so far, and not all the paths, and no plug and charge for -20 yet either. And the plug and charge, there was some testing as well. More partners there, quite a few sessions, even though we weren't so fully booked, because there's sort of lack of EV sites in total. A few minor issues observed. We made some internal tickets so far, and if there's anything relevant for the EVerest framework, we'll open up tickets for that. Nothing critical right now. So that was a great experience. I think it's the first time we operated EVerest on a charging testival. Previously, we did it with our own proprietary stack, so also gained some excellent experience with a stack in total.
Oh, it's nice to hear. All right, Shankari, do you have something to say to this event? Because I see you there, at least in the picture.
Yeah, so this is actually a month old, but I didn't attend the last TSC, so here's my report on it. So the TRB annual meeting is the biggest transportation conference in the US. Secretary Pete was actually the keynote, and I have a photo of him, which looks like a screen grab, but it isn't, because I was there in the ballroom where the presentation, where he gave his speech. And so given that there were a bunch of transportation professionals coming to DC anyway, I organized an informal sort of sidebar to talk about EVerest, and to basically sort of listen to questions or concerns that people may have. The three key takeaways were that there was a gap in understanding of the timeline for the CFR 680 requirements. As we've discussed in prior TSC meetings, by the end of February, which is in a week from now, the new charge station requirements for getting federal funding in the US take effect, which require plug and charge and OCPP 201. The majority of the people who attended this listening session, both in person and online, were not aware of that, apparently. And so, you know, it was a good sort of wake-up call that there was not sufficient, you know, understanding from industry, like they're not keeping track of the new requirements that are coming down. And so we highlighted it at the following webinar as well. And I think there will be some additional communication coming out once there's more conformance testing set up in the US for those requirements. There were some questions about standards and guidelines for grid integration. So the NEVI requirements do not say anything about requiring OpenADR or anything like that. And so, you know, there were some questions about whether those would ever come in. And people were interested and specifically asked for a copy of the slides to take back to their tech books.
All right, great to hear. I think you can also continue to about the webinar because I also attended that one.
All right. I'm sorry. There's this flu going around here. After fairly soon after that listening session, there was also a webinar that was hosted by the Linux Foundation, in which the Linux Foundation talked about open source in general. The Joint Office talked about why we wanted to do open source in this area and why we selected EVerest. And then Pionix talked about the history of EVerest and its architecture. And then we had a call to action in which we suggested that if people in the US wanted to, you know, incorporate EVerest into their production stations, we would be open to supporting 3 early adopters and creating a sort of pathway for others to follow down the same route. There was a very extensive Q&A, including questions on what the states should do with this information and so on, e-bike charging and a bunch of other things. And we sent some of the answers to some of them in a follow-up.
Cool, yeah, it was very interesting to watch. All right, let's continue with the working groups state of the union, how we call it, like how we do now basically organize this part of the TSC, that the working groups can give like a quick update on what they've been working on. In general, there's been quite a lot of like in-depth technical discussions across multiple organizations in these working groups. Attendance has generally been relatively good. And Zulip is also getting quite a lot of views. And due to this, the mailing list is getting a bit less traffic, which I think is exactly what we were aiming for. Then we started, or some of us started using HackMD for taking notes during these meetings, and the meeting notes will be stored in the EVerest wiki from now on at lfenergy.org. So let's have a quick. Oh, oops. Let's just ignore me jumping to the end of the slides real quick. Now let's have a quick overview on the cloud communication working group. Here we basically in the last month talked about our upcoming refactor of the WebSocket implementation. We're going to switch to using lib WebSockets there, like a soft switch, or basically implementing lib WebSockets in parallel to the existing implementation, and then having both implementations at the same time, which means that we are now redesigning the interface that's being used there, and hope to get this done relatively soon. Then we started using pull requests and issue templates, which we've also been starting to slowly roll out to other repositories in the EVerest code base, just to have things a little bit more organized. Then there's been work started on OCPP 201 smart charging, and there was a discussion if code between 1.6 and 201 could just be reused, but there are some slight differences in implementation and functional requirements. So we kind of not trying to immediately start over with the 1.6 code and basically make it compatible to 201, but basically we're just copying it over, changing it slightly, and then afterwards we'll be probably refactoring parts that are similar. Yeah, then test naming convention has been discussed. An off-cache cleanup happened, and some discussions about database migrations between libOCPP versions also already started, which will be implemented at some point in the future. All right, then the car communication working group. Not sure, Moritz, do you want to take this, or shall I?
Well, I was missing last time. That was I think today or yesterday, because I was busy with something else. But I can talk our way through it. So we had the XE V2G code generator, CBXEGen, creating the code which shall replace Open V2G. This is now in a separate repository as the actual generated code, so you don't have to do it yourself, and including some makefiles and stuff. We will work on putting some more procedures into there, inclusive tagging and stuff like that, and sort of have a process of bug fixing in the generator and migrating it to this repository. But now it can be integrated into the EVerest, into the whole infrastructure as a separate library, and then be referenced instead of pulling in the code into every component where you want to do it. As I already mentioned, the -20 stuff there in the libiso 15.11.8, there's now also ongoing work to do -2 and Dean in there in a similar fashion. Previously, all this was done in the FC-V2G module itself and not in the libiso 15.11.8. So we can perhaps have an integrated implementation of all protocols in the future. And so there's a pull request, a draft pull request to do this stuff. Still some work in progress on there. Joseph was obviously updated. There are always some bug fixing going on there, and the EVerest patches on top of that need to be rebased on top of that, need to be rebased every time if we want to pull those in. And the Pi EVSE Joseph, or the Pi Joseph module, is discontinued in favor of the other modules. The named FC-V2G has been in operation for quite some time. On the EV side, the Pi EV Joseph is still there because you can use that for simulating and the software in the loop, for example. And there is some work already happening on CHAdeMO as well. Totally different protocol, but should fit well into the EVerest infrastructure as well. And there was a lot of interest for that. So that's also happening right now in parallel to all these other new protocols. Okay. Oh,
Right,
help wanted. It says help
right.
wanted. Yeah, we have some opens there. There's already some volunteers, I think, raised their hands. So the FCV2G is still using OpenV2G. That's sort of low-hanging fruit to integrate the CVV2G there, and FCV2G perhaps to migrate libFSA security. libFSA security has a lot of features in terms of certificate handling, both for TLS and for plug and charge. And FCV2G is partly integrated, but not fully, so that the configurations you can use don't totally take effect right now. That's a bit unfortunate. If you know what you're doing, everything's okay, but that should be aligned.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that update. I think I'll continue with a quick update on EVerest framework and tooling. General, there's been a little bit more top-level introductions to the documentation added. You can see that on EVerest GitHub.io, and there's some smaller fixes and refactorings happening. Nothing too drastic. I think that will be happening, or not drastic, but probably bigger changes will happen in the next couple of weeks. So not much to update here. For the CI/CD and testing working group, we got this going over the last month, and basically, aligned with the different parties that are interested there on how we want to do unit testing, how we want to do integration testing in EVerest and in the libraries. There's been a testing best practices section added to the documentation. We got an update that for the Rust support, you can just use the general facilities that Rust gives you for testing, at least for unit testing. And yeah, in general, there's been quite a lot of discussions about how to do testing in EVerest, and there will probably be some more updates on that in the next couple of months. All right. Shankari, do you have an update to this event?
Right. So the Joint Office is sponsoring an adversarial PKI testing event at NREL. And so the goal behind this is that there was a prior PKI testing event, I think maybe last year or the year before, along with SAE and the ITS group within SAE, that primarily tested the happy path. You have a valid certificate from the car, does everything work? And so the goal with this is to test the non-happy paths. So what happens if you have a revoked certificate? Is everything being handled properly? What happens if you have an expired certificate? Is everything being handled correctly? What if there are too many plug and charge requests coming in, from some kind of malformed car or a potential hacking event? Like, will the station actually be able to detect and handle that DDoS attempt? Well, it's not DDoS, I guess it's only DOS, but the DOS event, and fall back to something else. And so given that the Joint Office is sponsoring both EVerest and the PKI testing event, we want to test EVerest at the PKI testing event. So we have asked for the instructions to participate as just a regular EVSE. We got the intake form just 2 days ago, so we're filling it out right now. If you want to bring hardware into the national lab environment, there have to be safety checks that need to happen and so on. We plan to purchase hardware, either the belay box or the micro megawatt charger, and participate like you would participate at any other testing event, and see how it works. So I might be asking some questions on the mailing list and the Zulip about this. And if anybody has any words of wisdom around what you expect and don't expect to work, we're happy to hear that as well.
Yeah, and we're certainly happy to help. All right. Not sure if this slide is still up to date from the JOET, but
yeah. So this is actually a slide that is maybe at completion right now. So I think all of the repos now do have a build and test CI. Several of them have actually been merged. The pending PRs are not really that pending anymore, although some of them are. And we're doing more unit testing around OCPP in particular. So I think that the high level point there around the improved build and test is still there. But the details are now closer to completion.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, then a little update to the general discussions and questions working group. Yeah, some people apparently were asking if a human interface module for LED strips should be part of EVerest or not. Currently, we see this kind of like a customization on top of EVerest, but if there's interest, I'm pretty sure somebody could contribute a driver there. In general, we're trying to help people to get started with EVerest development, and I think asking on Zulip is quite helpful for a lot of people because you can get answers relatively quickly. I hear that the payment terminal integration is also progressing, and yeah, we've introduced a updated release cycle, which you can see on this slide. At the moment, we're doing just regular monthly source code releases at around the time of the technical steering committee meeting. We will continue doing this, but additionally, every 3 months, we will add like a feature freeze window starting with around 2 weeks before the TSC, where we're just gonna start branching off release candidate branches on certain repositories, and basically focus on testing these branches more, also with with real hardware and vehicles and things like that. This doesn't have any this shouldn't concern you for if you want to merge things into main. We'll just work on these release candidate branches to stabilize them a little bit further, and merges to main should just continue as usual. Just we don't want to introduce new features to these release candidate branches starting from March. We will try this out and then see how this will go. There's a question.
Yeah, so I guess related to this and maybe the prior testing discussion, as we've been trying to actually run EVerest on real hardware ourselves, apparently there have been some issues in that recent versions of EVerest don't actually run on the belay box. You have to use a particular tag and so on. So is there going to be better documentation around that? And more sort of config files to support people running on hardware as opposed to just the software simulation?
Yes, that's a hope. And the situation with the belay box at the moment, we're working on basically a firmware update for the belay box, that it's actually compatible again with current EVerest. you're right. At the moment, the last release that works without any problems on the VLAN box, I think, is the release from October 2023. But once the firmware update is released, which hopefully shouldn't take too much more time, all EVerest releases starting from December last year up until now should be compatible with the VLAN box again. And we yeah, it's a good point. Should definitely add some more documentation on that, and also yeah, help people get this to run on all kinds of hardware. And yeah, the hope with this release cycle is that we just get a lot more hardware testing done, and we have like 2 weeks of time of doing that, which basically means that 4 times a year there should be a relatively well-tested EVerest release out there. All right.
So I will represent Cloud today. So basically, like last time, as reported, we started upstreaming some of the changes that we made in our fork. And actually now, by now, the Rust support, like as we see it, already upstreamed completely. So there is like framework supports it, and there are examples in the EVerest core how to use it. And so just a couple of modules. We started with upstreaming support relevant for Eichrecht. Like we already made like some pull requests, and like at least one of them was already merged with changes that required to get signed meter values. And we still want to continue further with like with Eichrecht support, including Iskra meter and more changes for payment terminal, like including FIC payment terminal support.
All right, cool. It's nice to hear. All right, then coming to the monthly release notes, it's just a very quick overview of some of the EVerest core features that have already been merged. Like there was an issue with connector lock-unlock happening too early before the release open, which has been fixed. The Rust examples have been updated. There's been an update to FCV2G. There's a pull request merge that basically now runs all the software in the loop simulation configs when you open a pull request on EVerest core. There's been some changes to the EVSE manager charger mutexes. Yeah, some changes to the DC to some DC power meter, not power meter, power supply. That is through bug fixes, and we're using now something we call enhanced charging schedules for the OCPP 1.6 module, which just gives you a bit more information than what the OCPP messages give you there. And yeah, we're now sending the boot reason as well for the OCPP 1.6 module as well as the 2.01. And as always, this will be released in the coming days. So let's have a quick look at the roadmap. So what's next? Not much has changed on these roadmaps at the moment. We're still hard at work at implementing OCPP 2.01 and starting a little bit of work on OCPP 2.1. These ChargeX error codes have already been merged as far as I'm aware. And there's ongoing work on ISO 15118, of course, as well as the XE parser and parser generator. We already heard from Quello that work on Rust and the ZVT implementation is also ongoing. and some work on CHAdeMO is also continuing. Yeah, let's just have a quick look on the OCPP timeline. That's also basically the same timeline as last month. I think we're pretty good on track with what we're planning there, and we'll give an update, I guess, in the next TSC or the one afterwards, how we hit these timeline targets. It's the same with ISO 158-20. There's a lot of work going on that, and we'll give an update next month or the month after how we hit these targets. And for the upcoming events, I mentioned it in the beginning, the open source in e-mobility conference, as well as the OCPP Plugfest are happening next week in Bad Schönborn at the Pionic site. Soon after, a week later, there's a OCPP Plugfest in the United States, which we from Pionic side at least will attend online this time. Shankari mentioned it earlier, the adversarial PKI testing event at the beginning of April. Then we'll probably be at Embedded World in the beginning of April, and give an online talk from Pionic side at least at Everything Open in the middle of April. There is a CharIN Testival in South Korea happening in the middle of April probably, which means that if somebody wants to go there and test EVerest, please volunteer. Yeah, we're gonna attend EVS 37 in South Korea. There'll be a open EV charging summit hosted at the TI site in the middle of May. Then there's next CharIN Testival in Europe, in Poland, early June. A ChargeTech in Munich, also in the beginning of June, as well as a CharIN Testival in North America planned, where we're, I think, still also looking for volunteers that want to test EVerest there. All right. Yeah, like I already said, this conference, open source in e-mobility, is already fully booked. I think we have a waiting list. You can still put your name on, but recordings of all the talks will be there on YouTube afterwards. And yeah, the next TSC, that will happen on the 28th of March at the same time. Maybe since it's I think 1 day before the Easter weekend, this might shift 1 week earlier or not. That's kind of depending on discussion. At the moment, I think we're set on going forward with the 28th of March, but yeah, we will inform everyone if this date should change over the main list. And yeah, so that's it. We now have time for discussions, and we'll cut this